Hi, I'm Amy, thank you for tuning in. July ended up being a really busy month for me, so I'm surprised that I managed to get any reading in at all, but actually it ended up being a pretty good reading month. The month started with my first appearance at YALC as an author, which was absolutely amazing. I did a panel with Ayana Gray and Morgan Owen, chaired by Beth from Books Nest, and I had such a good time. I was really nervous, but I actually really enjoyed being interviewed in the end. And then I did signing afterwards, and I spent the rest of the weekend enjoying Comic-Con, chatting to people about books, and wandering around YALC. So it was a really lovely time. And the rest of the month, I'm not quite sure why it was so busy, but I did manage to squeeze some reading in between. So I'll talk to you about the books that I read this month and the books that I'm planning to read in August. August is looking like it's going to be just as busy a month. It's starting with a week of Camp Spoopathon, where I'm going to be joining in my first ever live reading sprint, which I'm very excited and slightly nervous about. So on Monday the 1st of August, I'm going to be doing live reading sprints with Spoopy Holly on her channel. I'll link in the description below. And it'll be nice to actually dedicate some time to chatting about books and reading and see how live reading sprints work. So maybe I can have a go at doing them on my own channel at some point. And then the month is going to be busy because Mina and the Slayers comes out on the 1st of September. So I'm going to be doing quite a lot of promotional things and getting ready for events and things like that. So to the books that I've read in July, first up I've been doing the True Blood book club with Fictional Hangover, and this month's read was Altogether Dead. I'm still really enjoying these books. I think that every month I say similar things, but I just look forward to them. They feel like a really comforting world where I understand the rules and the parameters of it. It is sort of a romantic, sexy take on vampires, if you haven't read them or watched the TV shows. And the books have now deviated quite a bit from the TV show, so I'm not quite familiar with the plot, which is nice in a way that I don't really know where these are going. I am really enjoying them still. I always look forward to them every single month, so next month I'll certainly be reading the next one in the series. I also read The Nicest Girl by Sophie Jo. I haven't read much contemporary fiction lately, and this one has just made me think that I need to go back to it. It is about a girl who realised that she has been far too nice for far too long, that she lets people push her around when she should sometimes be saying no and respecting her own boundaries. And I did see a lot of my teenage self in this character, and I just really liked how Sophie Jo approached this book. The voice was just immediately gripping, the characters felt completely believable. I really liked the arc of how the main characters and the side characters developed in the book, and I just can't wait to see what Sophie Jo will write next. This comes out at the beginning of August, so pretty soon, and I'm really excited to see it all over the place and to see the finished cover, because this, although it's really cute, this is the proof copy. Okay, next I read one of my Ultimate Storyteller editions of the Stephen King books. I've started working my way through these, trying to read the books like Misery, that are so iconic and I haven't actually read. This one I found really interesting. At points it's thrilling throughout, very tense, even though it is based on just two characters mainly, an author who wakes up and he's been in a terrible accident, and the person taking care of him, in inverted commas taking care, is his biggest fan. A fan who is quite obsessive is probably a bit of an understatement. But that is the main premise, and I wasn't sure how tense I would find it just with that kind of closed room setting, but it's really, really compelling. Some of parts of it are quite gruesome. I was surprised. I shouldn't be surprised by Stephen King, how the gruesome depths he can go to, but I think in this one, because it read more like a thriller, some of the more horrific elements took me by surprise, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I loved the ruminations on writing in this. The main character has lots of thoughts as he's laying there in a bed after he's been injured, about writing and about his approach to writing. I always find it interesting to come across authors in books and think about how I approach things. So really enjoyed this one. I'm probably going to have a break from Stephen King for a little bit to catch up on some other things that I want to read. But I did really enjoy that, and it's made me want to read quite a few more of his books in the near future. Next up, I've been collecting vampire books that I used to read in the past and either had ebook copies or kind of incomplete collections. And the Night Hunters books were books I read when I was at university, so probably in my early 20s. I haven't read them since, so I thought I'd get the physical copies and give them another go. And I really enjoyed this one. I think in some ways when you read books written decades ago, sometimes you spot some of the language can feel a bit dated. Some of the storylines and the tropes can also feel that way. I really enjoyed this, bearing in mind that I read it a long time ago originally, so some of it was quite nostalgic. It's one of those books that is thrilling. The main character is a half vampire who has dedicated herself to killing vampires, but when she meets one that doesn't seem quite as cut and dry evil as she thought, she starts to question things. This series goes in a very interesting direction without spoiling it. The second book kind of goes off in a different direction from what I remember. There are some content warnings for this. I'm trying to word it carefully. Certainly some of the violence and implied violence and issues of consent, do look into it if you're considering reading this, because on the surface it's quite a light fun read, but it does deal with some quite difficult issues as well. Next, I read a non-fiction book, Hell's Half Acre, which is about America's first serial killer family, the Benders, and I wasn't sure what to expect with this one, and actually I really enjoyed it. It does spend time talking about the Benders, so it describes them actually in detail, like how they lived and things like that, and how they lured people to them, which is awful. But it also probably spends more time dealing about the world. It's sort of the American West, and what it was like to live on the frontier when civilization was being set up for the people who were moving there, but also it delves into what the lives were like to some extent of the people that already lived in America, the indigenous population. And I think it really, it sort of gives a really balanced viewpoint of what it was like at the time, attitudes to women in particular, attitudes to indigenous people, and also it talks about the world that the Benders are in as much as the Benders themselves. So really well done. I don't know, I think this might be Susan Genesis's first book, but I'll be interested to find out what else she writes. If you're interested in the Bender family or in the American West, I would certainly recommend giving this one a go. And finally, I read Heartstopper Volume 2. I'm quite late to these books. I knew I would enjoy them. It's just one of those things that I didn't get a chance to pick them up because I've been reading a lot of spooky books recently. And they're so heartwarming. I think they deal with the teenage experience and falling in love really beautifully. Absolutely adore the main characters. And I think the way that the other characters and their friendship groups are developed is really, really good as well. That how, in comic book form, I think Alice Oseman manages to capture so much in terms of emotion and depth. So I'm trying to make them last. There aren't that many of these books. I think I'm going to have a month off reading them, but I have got the next 2 lined up and ready to read. But yeah, I'm hoping to sort of make them last until the final edition, I think it is, the final issue comes out later this year. So next up to the books that I am currently reading. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself, having so many books on the go. I'm reading Big Bad Me by Aileen O'Loughlin, which I'm absolutely loving. As you can see, I've nearly finished it. This is a story about a girl who's a werewolf, who has spent her life sort of being protected by her sister and their mother, but when their mother goes missing, it kind of sets off a chain of events where they try to find her. Also has vampires, which I really like, and I describe this as sort of Buffy with werewolves. It has that feel of very intense relationships. It has the really clever dialogue and kind of pulling the rug out from under you and surprising you and keeping the reader on their toes. So I'm really enjoying this one. It comes out in October. I will probably finish it in the next couple of days. So next month I will be able to update you. Next up, I'm reading Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I haven't read loads of this yet, but I'm really enjoying the different characters. I think that Juno Dawson has adapted her writing style beautifully to writing adult fiction. And I think it's going to be an interesting feminist take on witchcraft. And it's sort of interesting to think how witchcraft fits into modern society, because I think quite a lot of the books I read have either a historical or fantasy feel. This is very much grounded in reality, with the touch of magic and witchcraft as well. So I think this is going to be a really, really good one. So next up, I'm going to be taking part, as I mentioned, in Camp Spoopathon. So I've set myself quite an ambitious TBR pile for that. One of the books hasn't arrived yet, but I can talk to you about the ones that have arrived, and I think I've set myself 4 books to read in a week, which probably won't happen, but I thought then I've got some choices and I can always read them later in the month. So first up, we've got Ready or Not by Tracy Darnton. This has been on my TBR pile before and I just didn't have time to get to it because there were other books I'd sort of promised myself or promised other people that I would read by the end of July. So this one is about Millie Summers have revolved around shared family holiday at Creek House since forever, hang out with the other kids, Matt, Charlie, Jem and her best friend Kat. But this year, secrets and tensions threaten to spoil everything, and only Millie wants to play the childhood games that once filled their days. Until the last night party prompts a game of hide and seek, and in the time it takes Millie to count to 20, Cat disappears. 5 play the game, 4 remain. Surely one of them knows what happened that night. It sounds really fun. It will tick off the thriller prompt in the Spoopathon. So I hopefully will get to that this week. I've also been seeing Kill River absolutely everywhere by Cameron Rubique. First off, I love this cover. This is a slasher set at summer, so that will tick off the summer prompt. It's set in the 80s, so that is a definite yes from me already. And there's a prompt about murder, so I think that this book will do really well with that. Next we have My Killer Vacation. Again, I think we'll probably delve into the murder, tick off the murder prompt and maybe the thriller one. So I might pick this one up if I'm struggling to get through my prompts by the end of the week. This one is about a girl and her brother are on holiday and they discover a corpse in their rental house. Bounty hunter arrives. I'm assuming romance will ensue. I haven't read any Tessa Bailey books, but I see them everywhere, so I'm looking forward to giving this one a go. I also am going to be reading The Haunting of Ashburn House, I think it's called, by Darcy Coates. There is a ghostly prompt, so I thought this will be a really good time to read another Darcy Coates book. I don't know much about that one, but Erin from Erin Megan, I will link to her channel in the description. She's a big Darcy Coates fan and she recommended that I try that one next, so that is what I'm going to do. Next up to a non-spooky read, I was sent the surprise copy of The Agency of Scandal by Laura Wood. I don't know if you can see the cover, it's quite shiny and beautiful. Laura Wood is one of my favourite authors. She writes historical, romantic YA fiction, as well as some middle grade, and I just absolutely love how engrossing her romances are. They've got those feelings, they really captivate what it's like to be in love, to fall in love. Generally they're against an exciting and interesting historical background too. Don't know much about this one apart from the fact that it is a female detective agency, and it comes out in January 2023, so hopefully I'll get to this one this month, even though it's a while before it comes out. I've also been sent a copy, thank you very much, to Hotkey Books, who sent me a copy of Waking the Witch by Rachel Burge. This one I know is about a girl. I'm just going to read the blurb because I don't want to mangle it. It's about a girl who goes search for her mother. She's drawn to a remote Welsh isle where she learns secrets about her past. Is linked to Welsh mythology and Arthurian legend, and I'm assuming something to do with the witch. And yeah, it sounds really interesting, so I'm looking forward to that. Can't believe I haven't read this book yet. The Hawthorne Legacy. I absolutely loved the Inheritance games. This is the sequel. I really want to read it before the next book comes out. So I'm hoping to get to this one this month. I read the Inheritance games really quickly, so hopefully I'll get to this one as well. The next Charlene Harris book, From Dead to Worse, is the next book in the Sucky Stackhouse mysteries. I'm personally not reading the blurb because I want to be surprised, but I'm hoping I'll enjoy this one just as much as the others. This one, a hefty tome, lift it up in 2 hands, Cults Inside Out. As I mentioned last month, I think, Don't Call It a Cult really interested me, and Rick Ross was a cult expert mentioned in that book, so I decided to pick his book up, but I just haven't had a chance to read it, and as you can see the length, I've got to make a big commitment to this one if I'm going to read it. Next up, I'm going to be reading a book which I'm not going to show you for Point Horror Book Club. I do know what it is, that we're reading this month. It's one of my favourite point horrors, and I like it so much I put it into Mina and the Slayer, so Mina actually is reading this point horror in the second book. I'm also planning to read The Good Girl's Guide to Murder because I've got it on audiobook and it's been a while since I read the physical copy of the book. I've been wanting to reread them, so I thought listening to them on audio might be a good way to do that, so I can hopefully fit in plenty of other reading this month. So I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much for sticking with me on the channel. As always, likes and subscribes are really appreciated. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books that I'm planning to read this month, and what you think of them. And please feel free to give me suggestions because, as always, I'm looking for more reading recommendations. I'm particularly feeling haunted houses at the moment, so if you can recommend any haunted house books, I'd love to hear about those. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.